Hello, everyone. I'm Krista Mackinnon, and I'm sitting here with Emma Bragdon, the Director of Integrative Mental Health for you. Emma, I am delighted to be able to ask you some questions about how it is that you came to, how you came to start the work that you're doing with Integrative Mental Health for you, and also a bit about some of your work before that. But let's start with Integrative Mental Health for you. How did you come to decide to create that incredible resource?
Well, thank you. The resource is, at this point, giving courses that are available online for people to learn more about integrative mental health. And the reason I wanted to offer it is because most of the online courses that are available and information sites that people are Googling are sponsored by the drug companies. That might not be absolutely obvious, but the sponsorship is usually there with a pretty strong desire to be out front and be able to be facilitated in selling products. So I wanted to create more of an independent site, where there were no lobbies or special interest behind it, and people could really become informed about the various whole spectrum of options available for dealing with and managing any kind of mental health disturbance.
That's so true what you say, that people might not even realize that it's not always upfront sort of how where the funding comes from to produce these extensive online classes or videos or whatever, but it definitely is going to flavor the kind of information you're going to get if the funding comes from a drug company. So it's great that the work that you're doing, the classes that you're teaching are independent. There's no, where does your funding come from? How do you do it?
That's a great question. At this point, it comes from the people purchasing the courses, and they are basically sponsoring me to use my knowledge and expertise and my ability to network to find
Right.
out really what these other options are, articulate them, and format them so that they're really user-friendly on the web.
Right. And so what is your expertise, and
Well,
how did you come to, I mean, yeah.
yeah, I'll say a little bit about my personal life because you were very inspiring, I think, the way you talked about your personal life in our interview. I came from a family that was, I guess from the outside, people would say privileged, and I had lots of opportunity, educational opportunities, travel opportunities, but hidden underneath was a lot of dysfunction. So in my early life, I experienced a father who was an alcoholic and a rageaholic, and there was a lot of dysfunction in terms of lack of communication, lack of being real, lack of being present. And so there was real neglect in some way for, in terms of what a family could be doing for each other.
Right.
So I didn't develop skills for it. And I didn't even know really what was missing until I started at age 18. I was introduced to meditation. And then something clicked in me, and I thought, my God, there's a whole other realm, and it can be shared with other people. And so it kind of opened up the ability to speak about my inner experience. And I happened to be with someone I was very close with when I had entered into the zone. So it opened up a whole other arena. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, there's this whole range of feelings that I have that are me that I need to learn how to deal with. And so I started going to psychotherapy, but at the same time I continued meditating. And so I was developing a broad perspective on what is available in human potential that is sometimes spoken of as self-realization or enlightenment and can sound very esoteric. And on the other side, I was involved with a kind of cathartic psychotherapy, which sometimes goes by the name of breath work these days, but at the time I was doing it, went by the name of bioenergetic therapy or neo-Reichian therapy. And basically what happened as soon as I got into that therapy is I started crying my eyes out or raging like crazy, which was in a very safe environment, contained environment. So I could let loose with the full range of feelings I had and realize what was inside of me and have someone trustworthy that I could communicate with who was accepting.
Yeah.
And it was tremendously healing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on from there to really look at how meditation or spirituality in a larger context dovetails with really good psychotherapy
Mm-hmm.
in order to move people towards their greatest human potential as being people who could be present and really alive in relationships and compassionate, and at the same time be developing their spiritual potential. So that's some of my story in a nutshell, and it did take me to get a PhD in transpersonal psychology, which was important for me, but and I was licensed as a marriage, family, child therapist. So I acquired a lot of skills and book learning during that time, which was helpful personally, but also set me up to be in private practice, which I learned so much from, and I feel I was able to really be in service to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the laws were changing and the way insurance was changing in the early 90s, I just thought I cannot abide by people being cut off from what they really need in psychotherapy, because we were being asked to go to very brief psychotherapy, see people only a very, very short period of time. And it was just cutting people off from really working to the point where they could fulfill more of their potential, and with help and guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So I started teaching, and that I've been teaching for the last 20 years to also help people in this process.
Teaching psychotherapy, or what have you been teaching?
It's really teaching in the realm of spiritual emergence. Like, how is it that we bring together, what we need to sort out with our psychology, with what we need to learn to create some kind of a conceptual framework and practice to move into our spiritual potential. So
I have to say, when I hear you speaking about it, it's exciting for me to listen to, but I hear you with kind of two minds, and then I also hear the families who I work with kind of say, hey, ask her this, and I know that a lot of the families that I work with would say, the families that are really struggling would say, that sounds great, but you're talking about kind of the worried well. You're not talking about my son who has schizophrenia, who believes cameras are in the corner monitoring him 24/7, who he can't leave because the CIA is going to get him because that's what he thinks. Like, how can he reach his human potential and meditate? He's ill. That's what I would hear from families, So how do you respond to something like that, to that kind of thinking or those kinds of concerns that somebody in that situation wouldn't be able to reach this human potential you're talking about because of the great distress, the psychic's, distress?
So I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy fix by any means to bring this into the realm of something that will quite quickly help a family in that situation. That's a very complex situation that's unique to each family, really. Mm-hmm. And I think the closest that we can get to working within spirituality for a family, and that means the person who's having the symptoms as well as the family who's trying to lovingly care for that person, is if the let's say the parents in that situation can practice a mindfulness or take some few minutes a day to just listen to their breathing to calm themselves, and so that they're more in touch with their own intuitive knowledge about what is best for themselves and their loved ones. So that is sometimes the very, very best that we can do in that situation. And then for the person who is having the symptoms, I think there are integrative psychiatrists who can really assist people in that situation to assess do they need micronutrients that will help them actually become more balanced, or do they need something else. And I'm fortunate in my line of work to be able to be meeting these fantastic integrative psychiatrists who aren't just saying, well, if someone says they're talking to God or someone is having bizarre, what we call hallucinations, then they need meds. That's it. End of story. Instead, there are people who are available to us, both online as well as by telephone, as well as going for consultations, that have a much broader view of what's going on. And so with the family that you were just talking about, I would suggest that they don't just look at it as an either-or situation, like whether this horrible time where they're really afraid for the well-being or even the life of their loved one, or put them on meds as fast as possible. But there's a huge spectrum or lots of opportunities to really help their loved one and to move forward and to be safe. So I think
you recently did a class, about 9 psychiatrists doing integrative mental health work, right?
Yes, right.
Do you want to speak to that class a little bit?
Okay. So that particular class was really designed to expose people to what an integrative psychiatrist thinks like, looks like, and the ones that I was speaking with and interviewing or bringing online through videos that were pre-recorded was these are people who are in private practice who are working with some of the most severely distressed people and families, as well as working with people who do not have as much distress but clearly know that they're somewhat out of balance. So for instance, in the somewhat out of balance is what comes to mind is a woman, a psychiatrist in Arizona who was trained at the most conventional medical schools and the medical schools that we consider the best. So she has that in her bag of tricks, everything that she learned, but she went on, and one of the things that she's come to learn is that allergies to mold is a very, very frequent cause of depression. And so being able to recognize that through a test and then be able to purify the body, to let go of the toxins, and then be able to detoxify the environment can literally remove people from either very modest or profound depression. Wow. And so that's a huge bit of information that people wouldn't necessarily get if they went to just a conventionally trained person.
Right.
So these people who are on the course...
What is her name, just in case anybody listening is curious?
It's Mary Ackerley. And her website is Passion for Health.
Great.
So, so she's one of many people that I'm meeting now who have this conventional training, but then they've also said, wait a minute, there's a lot more going on right now, and it's very exciting and compelling, not only because it's new, but because it's effective. Right. So anyway, I've been feeling very hopeful about psychiatry because I think through books like Robert Whitaker's Anatomy of an Epidemic, people are reflecting and saying, wait a minute, drugs aren't what we thought they were going to be and hoped that they were going to be. And so what else is out there? And so people are hungry for this kind of information. And I'm trying to be a resource so that people can be exposed, but then also literally improve their networks, get contact information, and get what they need. And I definitely don't see myself as an ivory tower academic or someone who's just working with the privileged who have a very modest difficulty. I'm really trying to address people who are dealing with themselves or a loved one who may have a modest problem or may have extremely severe problem. And the courses are covering some of the basics. Also, like I put one course together that's on relationship because that's really the place where we experience trauma and betrayal and problems. Sure. And we need to learn how to communicate. So, and a lot can be learned online around that. So there's one course on relationships that's just covers the basics and also exposes people to what else is available.
How many classes do you have now online? How many classes does your website offer?
Yeah, it offers 10 right now.
Wow.
And So I'm very happy about that. It's been a lot of hard work in the last
bet.
bit, and I'm also just continually renewed in my excitement about this, because I don't see that there's very much out there for people who are really the consumers of mental health. There's quite a bit out there for people like psychiatrists or healthcare providers to get ongoing education and continuing education units, but then what does the consumer do? So,
It's true. It's true. It's so true for families too. Families, I often thought this in working in mental health, working in organizations, how the staff get all this training and, we get training in CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, or acceptance and commitment therapy, or motivational interviewing, and we would get all this training. And what we did at the Family Outreach and Response Program in Toronto is we took all the training that we got and we just made cognitive behavior therapy for families. It's so, they're the ones who are living day in and day out and wanting these skills, and they're not getting them. Nobody teaches them that, and it's so important to learn all that, to learn that stuff. If you want to be a really good support person, that's a great way to get some skills.
Well, it's curious to me, because I was thinking, okay, the real need is with consumers, and so I started putting out the courses, and there's a faculty of 20 people that I have right now who are being in the courses, and then I started realizing a lot of people who are signing up are healthcare providers, and I think there's also an enormous hunger there, because people are really recognizing the tremendous need to expand their knowledge outside the confines of what they learned in school. And a lot of what I'm doing right now are things that I also learned outside of my PhD program.
Oh, for sure. Me too. A lot of things I do are outside of what I've learned in school. But for sure. Yeah.
So,
that's you've done. And how long has the university been? How long has Integrative Mental Health for you been active online?
Well, it was called university to begin with, but the state of Vermont didn't like that name, because I don't grant any credits right now that are transferable, and I don't grant degrees. Maybe in the future, but at this point, no. And so they said, can't use the name. So I'm Integrative Mental Health for you. And it's been around formally since May of 2013. So we're still toddling, but on the other hand, we're up and going. And so we have courses online, and also I do a trip once a year to Brazil and take health providers in that course to visit the Spiritist psychiatric hospitals as well as the Spiritist centers, because there's a whole other model for healthcare that's going on in Brazil that's very, very successful. And
that sounds like an opportunity for another interview.
Well,
I would love to ask you some more about that. Yeah,
I'd love to talk about it more. So I want to thank you, Krista, for interviewing me. It's
my pleasure. Yeah, thank you for chatting. Emma Bragdon, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.